Ever experienced a moment where all escape routes seemed to be closed, but somehow, miraculously, you were rescued from danger? A near accident, a sudden decision that changed your fate, a seemingly insurmountable crisis. Are all these truly just random coincidences? Or are they signs of an invisible hand always watching over you? Perhaps from that very moment, you were marked by God, placed under His divine protection. That divine mark is not a visible sign for others to recognize, but a profound transformation within the soul, an inner call reminding you that you belong to God. It does not come from fame, success, or the recognition of others, but originates from a strong conviction within, from a longing to follow God's ways. But how can we be sure that we are truly placed under His protection and grace? We can recognize that mark through inner peace, through the small miracles of everyday life that we sometimes overlook, and most importantly, through the undeniable transformation in our spirit. C.S. Lewis, a great Christian thinker, once said, "Pride is not looking to God for the supply of your needs. It is looking to Him with the wrong kind of attention. It wants to be admired by Him, not to be dependent on Him." He points out that people often tend to seek glorification from the world, trying to affirm their self-worth through the eyes of others instead of placing God at the center. But the mark of God is not the recognition that comes from humans, but a profound inner transformation. Those who truly bear that mark are no longer dominated by temporary values, but they will let the Holy Spirit guide their every step and then experience the power of protection, supernatural provision, and abundant grace that God has for them. When you realize that the world is no longer the measure of your worth, when you can trust in God instead of worrying about the UPS and downs of life, when you know that nothing can separate you from His love, that is the sign that you are living under the protection of God. And once you bear that mark, your life will never be the same again. God is a strong fortress, a sheltering shade for all who belong to Him. He is not just a distant concept or a vague promise, but a real protector, the one who always watches over His people. When the world shakes, when trials cover like a storm, those who trust in God will stand firm like Mount Zion, unshaken. Psalm 91:3 says, "Surely He will save you from the fowler's snare and from the deadly pestilence." This is not just an ancient Bible verse, but a powerful guarantee for all who place their faith in Him today. He sent angels to shut the mouths of lions so that Daniel was safe. He put strength in the small hand of David so that the shepherd boy defeated the giant Goliath. And He still acts today. He is protecting, guiding, and guarding those who belong to Him amidst the storms of life. No power, no force can withstand the protection of God. If He created the universe by His word, will He not also be able to keep your soul from danger? Stand firm, trust, for your God never slumbers and never leaves you alone. But God's protection does not mean that we will never face challenges. On the contrary, challenges are the very environment to demonstrate His power, the opportunity for our faith to be trained and grow stronger. C.S. Lewis once said, "There are far, far better things ahead than any we leave behind." This is not just an encouragement, but also a sure promise that even in adversity, God is preparing something better for those who trust in Him. Look at the life of David. He was not the strongest warrior, had no sophisticated weapons or a mighty army, but he had one thing that Goliath did not have: an unwavering faith in God. It was that faith that helped him defeat a giant enemy, and God used him to change the history of Israel. Joseph was the same, a young man sold into slavery, suffering injustice and imprisonment, but in all circumstances, he remained faithful to God. He prepared for him a position that no one could prevent, a path that only His providence could open. If you feel you are in a difficult situation, do not be afraid. Remember that God never lets you face challenges in vain. He is using the very hardships, the temporary failures to refine you, to mold you into the person He has destined you to be. Every challenge you are facing is not a sign of failure, but a stepping stone for God to bring you to a place that you yourself cannot imagine. Trust in Him, for those who are faithful will see His glory revealed in their lives. Not only does God protect, but He also provides abundantly for those who belong to Him. Remember the Israelites in the wilderness. When there was no food, He provided manna from heaven, enough for their daily needs. When Elijah faced famine, He sent ravens to bring him bread and meat at the Kerith ravine. When someone like Joseph, from being sold into slavery, falsely accused and imprisoned in a dark prison, seemingly forgotten, it was God who opened the door of destiny, bringing him to the position of vizier, second only to Pharaoh. He turns seemingly unfavorable things into good, as Romans 8:28 affirms. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "God doesn't give us everything we want, but He always keeps His promises." This saying reminds us that perhaps the things we expect do not happen in the way we think, but what God gives is always the best according to His great plan. He not only provides enough for our needs, but He also acts to prepare the way we must go, a path far beyond human understanding. The mark of God is not only expressed through protection and provision, but also through His boundless grace. Deuteronomy 32:13 says that God will give honey from the rock, an image symbolizing supernatural provision, surpassing all human limitations. He not only gives us what is necessary to survive, but He gives abundantly, so that we may experience His love and power fully. But do not forget that grace is not a privilege for us to become arrogant or complacent. C.S. Lewis warns, "Pride is the sin that the devil fell by." If we think that success comes from ourselves, we will stray from God's grace. But if we humbly recognize that all blessings come from Him, we will always be in His shelter and guidance. When we understand that God is the provider, the giver of grace, and the keeper of promises, we will no longer live in worry or fear about the future. We will walk with the firm belief that everything He does is good, and that His care never ceases for those who love Him. Peace and joy are gifts that God gives to those who belong to Him. It is not the temporary peace of the world, but a peace that surpasses all human understanding. C.S. Lewis affirms, God cannot give us happiness and peace apart from Himself, because it does not exist. If you seek joy in money, fame, or success, you will soon realize that it is all meaningless. But if you seek joy in God, you will have a happiness that no one can take away. Those who bear the mark of God do not mean that they will not encounter difficulties, but they will have a victorious life. Romans 8:37 says, "No, in all these things we are more than conquerors through Him who loved us." This means that we do not simply overcome challenges, but we will triumph gloriously. David did not run away from Goliath. Joseph did not collapse in prison, and Peter, after receiving the Holy Spirit, was no longer afraid of worldly power. C.S. Lewis once said, "Hardships often prepare ordinary people for an extraordinary destiny." If you are going through trials, remember that God is using it to prepare you for a great future. Another sign is how those who bear the mark of God treat those around them. They do not harbor resentment or seek revenge, but show love and forgiveness, for they are aware that they themselves have been forgiven by God's grace. C.S. Lewis advises, don't waste time thinking about the people who hurt you. Think about the one who loved you enough to die for you. Jesus once taught, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Matthew 5:44. He demonstrated this perfectly through his prayer on the cross. Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. Luke 23:34. That love is not a sign of weakness, but a superior strength, surpassing the hatred of the world. The mark of God brings boldness in faith. Peter, before receiving the Holy Spirit, was afraid to the point of denying Christ 3 times. But afterwards, he boldly stood up to preach, despite the threats of the world. C.S. Lewis once encouraged, "Courage, dear heart. When you know that God is with you, you will no longer be afraid. Remember, if God has marked you, nothing can separate you from his love. Though you walk through fire, you will not be burned. Though you walk through flood waters, you will not be swept away. For the one who called you, he will also protect, provide, and bless you forever." Do you bear the divine mark of God? If so, give thanks to him every day, for it is a priceless privilege. Stand firm in God's calling, so that your life becomes a light reflecting his glory, a living testament to his love and power. If you have not yet recognized that mark, do not hesitate. Seek God today, for he is always waiting for you with loving arms. The mark of God not only protects you from danger, but also transforms your spirit, renews your mind, so that you may live a full life filled with meaning and glory for him. Open your heart, enter into a deep relationship with the Creator, and let that divine mark guide you to a life completely transformed in his love and grace.